Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Thursday, December 16th. And if you'd like additional weather information, as always, you can go to weather.gov/Alaska. We have all sorts of information there that you can connect with. If you have any questions or interesting observations or report you wish to pass on to me, you can reach me at peter.chan@noaa.gov. Let's get into things here in the weather headlines. Well, we are into a rather progressive weather pattern that's going to continue through the end of this month, right up through the holidays. We're going to see a series of bearing systems with increasingly milder air working their way in, first impacting the west and southwest coast and then spreading into the interior. The precipitation thus far has been primarily snow, but later on this weekend there'll be a pretty good push of milder air that makes it in along the west and southwest coast that could cause the precipitation there to mix with or change to some freezing rain or rain as that warmer air comes in behind the frontal system. And then the areas of precipitation will be spreading inland where the colder air resides and largely stays in the form of snow. But we are anticipating, even though we're going to see some intrusions of milder air from time to time, especially along the west side of the state, the east side along the Panhandle, I should say the Alcan border dropping down into the Panhandle, could see much below normal temperatures here around Christmas time. So keep that in mind. But otherwise, here's the way things are shaping up this afternoon. Arctic Village had a low last night of 46 below zero. Now they're seeing some patchy light snow this afternoon. Northway got down to 42 below last night and seeing a few breaks in the clouds this Thursday afternoon. If we take a look out to the west, Nome had some snow and blowing snow. Their winter storm warning has since expired, but they got another round coming into there as some periods of snow on and off early in the weekend with a stronger system bringing snow changing to or mixing with some freezing rain or rain by Sunday. And then in the Panhandle, Cape Spencer, around Elf and Cove, was mostly cloudy today, a couple of breaks in that overcast sky and a temperature of 28 degrees. Well, here are the current, these are some advisories that have been just recently issued. We have a winter weather advisory for Hooper Bay area, Scammon Bay on up toward McGrath, where anywhere from 2 to as much as 6 inches of snow could fall along with some blowing snow. And then we have, and that would be overnight through about 9 a.m., I should say 3 p.m. on Friday. The Yakutat area has a winter weather advisory now until noon Friday, and then the lower portion of the Panhandle that includes Ketchikan and Heidelberg have a winter weather advisory in effect from 9 a.m. Friday until midnight Friday night. And again, at least a few 3 to 6 inches of snow could fall, especially up through the higher elevations there, as there'll be a weaker area of low pressure sitting off of the Gulf there. But the frontal system that continues to work its way inland, the first one at least, we still have blizzard warnings there, Point Hope on up toward Wainwright, and that will be winding down overnight. That's been mainly a ground blizzard, just a lot of wind blowing the existing snow that's on the ground. Kotzebue winter storm warning also will expire at midnight tonight. And conditions should be improving there as well. And then the advisories along the Arctic coast are coming down this evening, as will the one along the eastern half of the Brooks Range. Well, another thing to pass along, coming up early next week on Tuesday, the winter solstice occurs across the northern hemisphere, and that'll be the shortest day of daylight, the longest night, Tuesday at just before 7 a.m. Alaska Standard Time. That image was of Deneki Bridge there crossing Willow Creek. Looking at the satellite imagery, you'll be able to see, the cloud cover associated with the one system out over the Gulf. Not an especially strong low, but that's going to be bringing the snow to portions of the northern and southern Panhandle tonight and on Friday. Back up across the mainland, quite a bit of cloud cover. Unfortunate because Really can't see a comet visible in the sky. The Geminid meteor shower was earlier this week, and if we would have had clear conditions, it would have been quite spectacular, but very cold, as whenever we have clear skies this time of year. And looking out to the further west there in North Shimia there in the western Aleutians, you see the curl in the clouds. That's that area of low pressure working its way on up through the western Bering. And that's the area we're going to be watching here really through the end of the month. We're going to see a series of weather systems coming out of the North Pacific, moving through the Bering, and they're going to have increasingly some milder air with them. As a result, along the west and southwest coast, we'll erode away at the cold air, and so that's going to allow the snow to at times mix with or change to some freezing rain, or rain especially on the back side of a front in the areas of some heavier precipitation. So here's a weather map today. We have a couple of lows, kind of tail end systems with the frontal system that originally worked its way up through the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula that's entering into the Gulf. That's going to enhance the snow threat there, the northern panhandle around Yakutat and down toward Ketchikan and Heidelberg on Friday. And then back through the interior, we have areas of light snow across the interior along north of the Alaska Range, Yukon valleys on up to the Brooks Range. And we expect those to continue overnight into the day on Friday. Next system comes on shore there in through the YK deltas, working its way inland, pretty strong low, and that'll also have some blowing snow associated with it as well. Not especially heavy snowfall, but enough to create, as I said, those winter weather advisory conditions there from around Scammon Bay northeastward inland up to McGrath. And then as we go into Saturday, there's an even milder system that's going to be taking a similar course through the Bering, and it's going to be a little windier too, so there'll be more in the way of blowing snow out ahead of that warm front as it works its way on up through St. Lawrence and Nunavik Islands, and then into the west coast and down through the southwest coast as well. And back out toward the Yukon, you see that area of high pressure. That feature will in time strengthen, and that's going to allow the cold air to really build over northwest Canada and to intrude at least into the southeast portion of the state along the Alcan border and into the Panhandle. And I'll show you coming up that likelihood of much below normal temperatures there in the southeast here as we get especially toward Christmas. So low temperatures, we are looking for lows in the teens across the northern Panhandle, 20s, the outer areas, Ketchikan, about 23, 24 at Craig. As we get up toward Glen Allen, even with some cloud cover, -9, but at least temperatures will not be quite as cold as the past few nights. And then Friday afternoon, temperatures, a little warmer airs creeping up from the southwest. So we're going to see temperatures along the Alaska Peninsula going upward, and that'll spread into south central areas. We should get back up upper teens to around 20, Talkeetna, as well as Kenai and Anchorage. You can see along the outer areas there of the Panhandle, temperature should get a couple degrees above freezing. Elsewhere toward the inner channels, especially Juneau on up toward Skagway, Haines, will stay below freezing in the 20s. Saturday morning lows could get down to 11 below at Glen Allen, but otherwise not as cold as what it has been for the south central interior. And then Saturday afternoon highs should get back up into at least the lower to maybe middle 20s there in south central areas, and back up around and above freezing as you get out along the Alaska Peninsula, including Kodiak Island. Across the north, not as cold as it has been, but still sub-zero along the North Slope, Arctic coast, as well as Yukon Flats. Coming upward, though, temperatures there in through the Seward Peninsula, 10, 15 above. And then temperatures could be approaching freezing there. Eamonnuk, as well as, would be surprised, Nome could even squeak out 30 on Friday afternoon. And then as we go into Saturday morning, still chilly lows below zero, but not as cold as it has been. And temperatures moderating a bit there along the west and through the middle lower Yukon basin. For Saturday afternoon, we expect highs to stay sub-zero across the Arctic coast, portions of the Yukon Flat, including Yukon Village. Arctic Village. And Fort Yukon may have a high only near zero. Back up through the lower portion of the Yukon River basin, we should get temperatures back up in the 20s. Friday morning lows will generally be in the teens to even coming up into the mid-20s along the coast there, and then certainly above freezing as we get out along the Alaska Peninsula and in through the Aleutians. Friday afternoon highs get back up around or a couple degrees above freezing, including Bethel there, maybe 34, and certainly along Bristol Bay and Could see 40-degree readings as you get southwest of King Salmon and extending out into the Aleutians. Saturday morning lows stay a bit milder for a change, generally in the 20s across the interior, 30s, lower mid-30s across the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And then temperatures Saturday afternoon, we're going to start to see some readings get back up around or a tad above freezing, creeping up the lower Yukon, Kuskokwim River basins on the west side of the Alaska Range and extending out down through the Alaska Peninsula with some readings in the lower to mid-40s as you get out the tip of the Alaska Peninsula through Dutch Harbor and out toward Adak. So let's look at what we have for this extended temperature outlook that centers on and just before Christmas. We are looking for a pretty good likelihood as that high pressure strengthens over northwest Canada. That's going to keep a colder offshore flow going there across the southeast parts of the state, so much below normal temperatures are looking likely just before and around Christmas time there in areas like Yakutat, Juneau, Sitka, Ketchikan, and even extending up toward Cordova and McCarthy. And it will still be below normal temperatures elsewhere in the state, just not as significant as areas of the west and southwest have seen here earlier in the month. And then as we look at precipitation, should average below normal across south central and the southeast, and precipitation could end up averaging a bit above normal, especially along and north of the Yukon River, extending up through the North Slope and Arctic coast.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's time now for the aviation weather for our segment, and if you are planning a flight Friday into Saturday, we do have an active weather pattern, especially across the west side of the state as of Friday morning. Weak low pressure in the Gulf will keep some IFR conditions, northern panhandle and areas of the Gulf, extending up to south of the Alaska Range across much of the Yukon Valley, south of the Brooks Range, and much of the northwest, west, and southwest portions of the state. That one frontal system moves in, weakens, and we have another one on the way that'll be approaching by early Saturday as low pressure out over the western Bering will be moving across St. Matthew, heading northeastward. And as we go through the day, Friday afternoon, we'll see IFR conditions continuing across much of the panhandle, especially out through the central and west and southwest side of the state. And then for Saturday morning, conditions should improve a bit across the panhandle Saturday as high pressure over the southern Yukon and northern British Columbia will increase offshore colder flow. But to the areas of the west, we see extensive IFR conditions, central and western portion of Alaska. And then we have yet another frontal system that'll be moving on later on in the weekend, especially as we get into the day on Sunday. So as that moisture spreads eastward across the interior, look for areas of IFR from the Arctic coast southward to the Alaska Range at times. Anaktuvik will generally see IFR conditions on Friday, as will Atigun passes. And then as we hit down toward the south and west, Lake Clark and Merrill should generally be in IFR conditions, but could see MVFR conditions briefly, at least in the afternoon on Friday, east entrances. And then for Friday, generally MVFR conditions are expected at Rainy Pass. Windy Pass will see IFR conditions become MVFR, as will Isabel. And that would be primarily during the daytime briefly. And then Metasta should hold on to MVFR conditions throughout the day on Friday. Tanita, we'll see IFR conditions in the morning becoming MVFR. And Portage Pass is kind of a split. On the west entrance, IFR conditions in the morning becoming MVFR. On the east entrance, MVFR conditions becoming VFR as we go through the day. But overall, MVFR conditions expected. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Chilkoot and White there in the northern panhandle will be socked in with IFR conditions throughout Friday. Quick check of the freezing level. The surface freezing level is out into the central Bering from around St. Matthew through the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula and off of the southeast coast through Haida Gwaii. Briefly, we see about 2,000 foot or so freezing levels there coming up in through the eastern Aleutians. Best chance of icing for Friday out over the Gulf between 2,000 and 8,000 feet associated with weak low pressure. We have a frontal system there approaching from the Bering along the southwest coast, so between 2,000 and 10,000 feet around St. Matthew, Nunavik Island, the southwest coast, and 4,000 to 12,000 feet across the eastern Aleutians. Jet stream level winds are quite strong Out over the Bering, upwards to 150 knot anticyclonically curved jet max, as we would say, from the northwest, diving across the eastern portion of, or I should say, the central Aleutians. And then we do have a little bit of a ridge that comes up through the southwest portion of the state, and then we have winds around 100 knots coming onshore from the southwest Haida into British Columbia. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, we do see winds that are in excess of 60 knots across southwest Alaska and through the Alaska Peninsula, and then extending back out in through the central and western area of the Aleutians, with winds upwards to 100 knots there at 9,000 feet just to the south of the western portion of the Aleutians. For 3,000 foot level, we have a high pressure area that's going to gradually be building through the weekend and early next week out over southern Yukon, northern British Columbia. Still an area of low pressure in the Gulf, though not especially strong, but there could be some winds there to 50 knots just off of the outer coast there of the Panhandle, and then winds 50 to 60 knots moving into the Alaska Peninsula and extending out to the Bering north of the central and eastern Aleutians. And that's going to translate to turbulence. We do expect some turbulence, surface to 5,000 feet across, especially the outer coast areas there of the Panhandle. And then across the southwest, we could see isolated severe turbulence coming on up into, say, the lower Kuskokwim Basin, surface to 5,000 feet generally. Also some isolated severe turbulence may be possible there out over the central Aleutians between the surface and 3,000 feet. So that's your flight weather. If you are heading out, check the latest conditions and forecast, and have a safe flight.
Happy solstice, Star Pals. Trace here, and each year, twice a year, there's a solstice where the sun seems to stop and head back across the sky. In Latin, sol means sun, and stis means to stand still. The solstice aligns with Tuesday, December 21st. It'll be the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere and the longest day in the southern hemisphere. Viva! You should use the long night to see the Great Square of Pegasus, one of my faves. Hit the darkness around 9 and look west. There you should see stars Markab, Shiat, Alpheratz, and Algenib forming the big box, the body of Pegasus, Hercules' mythical winged horse. The solstice was part of the pagan festival of Yule, a 12-day festival where fires were burned, Yule logs, for 12 days of celebrations. Christmas is borrowed from this festival, so happy Yule and keep looking up.
The beluga whale, also known as the white whale, lives in large groups and are unusual among whales. They have no dorsal fin, large bulbous heads, and they can actually swim backwards. To feed, they produce sound to find and hunt fish and invertebrates, and they use sound to communicate.
They're also known as the canaries of the sea because they make such a diversity of noises. They make chirps and whistles and gurgles and trumpeting sounds. They just make all kinds of sounds.
In the U.S., beluga whales live in the cold waters of Alaska, and there are 5 separate populations. Of those 5, the Cook Inlet population is the smallest, and has declined by about 75%. Subsistence hunting may have contributed to this initial population drop, but this practice was regulated starting in 1999, with the last hunt in 2005. Still, the beluga population here has yet to recover.
We listed Cook Inlet beluga whales as an endangered species under the Endangered Species Act in 2008, and we had hoped that the population would start recovering, but we are still seeing a continued decline. And these beluga whales are only found in Cook Inlet, and so if they go extinct, we don't think any other belugas will come back and populate this area.
These whales spend most of their summer near Anchorage, Alaska's largest city, where threats to belugas are on the rise as the city grows. These may include diminishing food, habitat loss or destruction, pollution, toxins, and human-caused noise which hampers their ability to feed and communicate. Researchers are trying to understand which of these threats may be impacting them most, but Cook Inlet is a tough place to work.
It's really hostile for research. We have the strong tides, which makes it challenging for human safety, and we can't see through the water. It is very muddy, so we're pretty much limited to the part of the animal that breaks the surface of the water. And as a result, we have limited information about the specific population dynamics of coconut beluga whales.
Up until recently, information has mainly come from annual aerial surveys from aircraft and boat or shore-based photo identification surveys that use unique markings to tell animals apart. Scientists also use passive acoustics to listen for belugas, but none of these methods can detect much information about their health.
So it's really been a game changer with the whole species in the spotlight designation. We've gotten more resources within our agency.
For instance, we're able to use a drone to collect some aerial imagery of belugas in the wild, and we're hoping to learn some information about the age classes, information about the health status.
And probably the most important bit of information that we'll get out of that is we'll be able to identify the new calves. And we're hoping if we keep doing this every year, we'll be able to get an estimate of calf production every year that will tell us something about how well the population is doing.
We are also expanding upon our biopsy studies, hopefully to give us some information about sex, the individual's reproductive status, some genetic information, some contaminant loads.
Public and private partners are contributing as well. Some are looking at toxin levels in the whale's prey, while others are analyzing beluga teeth to learn about their age and past diet. Others monitor water quality and how belugas react to boats, and more check to see if their behavior changes with increased background noise. All of these findings will go toward developing effective recovery strategies for this population.
As for what you can do, if you're out boating, give belugas space. Don't drive right up next to them. Stay about 100 yards away. If you're flying over them, just remember that you're putting noise into the water as well, and so stay at least 1,500 feet above them. Report a stranded beluga whale as soon as possible, and that's if they're dead stranded or live stranded. The amount of information that we can learn from these animals by responding to a stranding is monumental, and it will help our efforts to recover them.
Together we can help beluga whales thrive in the dynamic waters of Cook Inlet. With continued research and good stewardship, we hope to see this population grow in the years to come.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and it's time now for your marine weather. We start with today's sea ice edge, and the most important thing is we're going to have a series of systems coming in off the Bering, and there's going to be one that's quite windy here, especially as we go through the course of the weekend. And that's going to cause the ice to shift around. We have some stronger southeast to south winds ahead of frontal systems that then will shift around to the west, and that will move the ice, so keep that in mind. Plus, we're going to see some milder temperatures getting back up around and above freezing along the west and southwest coast. So any of the leading ice edge there is going to shift around, especially northward, and also have a tendency to break up a bit. All right, let's look at what we have for the marine forecast Friday for the inner canals. Winds out of the north, Petersburg northward through Juneau, Skagway, 20 to 20 knots, gust up to 35 knots, vicinity there of Petersburg, waves 4 feet. Southeasterly winds to 25 knot there around Metlakatla and Ketchikan. Otherwise, 35 knot gales from the southeast off of Craig and Sitka, waves as high as 12 to 13 feet. For Saturday, winds turn more northerly across the inner canals and inner coastal mountains, as high as 25 knots with gusts to 40 with that colder air filtering down along the length of Lynn Canal, waves 6 feet there. And then along the Gulf Coast, winds will be north to northwest, Craig up through Sitka and Gustavus, but turn more westerly and tapering off to 15 knots west of Yakutat. Waves generally 8 to 11 feet along the primary Panhandle coast and 6 to 7 feet west of Yakutat. For the south central areas, northern Gulf Coast, northwest coast, we are looking for winds to be variable around 10 knots with ice there in the north end of Cook Inlet, but more northwesterly, 20 to 25 knots from the mouth of Cook Inlet out toward off of Kodiak and the Kenai, with waves 7-8 feet. And then as we go into Saturday, winds will be out of the northwest, 15 knots, 3-footers there at Prince William Sound, but stronger outflow winds there at the mouth of Cook Inlet north of Kodiak, 30 to 35 knots with waves running around 10 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island there, looking for winds out of the west-northwest, 20 knots, waves 5 to 8 feet. But as we head out down the length of the Alaska Peninsula, winds are going to turn more south and southwesterly, picking up to 35-knot gales, waves 12 feet either side there on the North Pacific or Bering. And then on Saturday, winds turn more west and westerly across Kodiak Island, 30 to 35 knots. Highest waves well offshore of Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula, but we do see winds picking up from the southwest there to 35 knots, 20-foot waves north of Cold Bay. And that's in response to another frontal system we'll be watching. One is coming on through the area. Strongest winds, highest waves will be north of the central Aleutians Friday afternoon, but we are looking for generally southwest to west 35-knot gales. Waves 13 to say 16 feet on the North Pacific side, and anywhere from 14 to near 20 feet on the Bering side. And then there's a stronger system coming out on Saturday, and this one will have its greatest impact going through Saturday and Sunday. We're looking for at least 35 to 45 knot gales from the south, and increasing to 50-knot gales with higher gusts west of Adak on Saturday afternoon. And waves will be building in excess of 20 feet, especially from Adak westward, where they could exceed 30 feet there in the vicinity of Kiska and areas out over the Bering north of Kiska. Friday, across the west-southwest coast, including Bristol Bay, the ice there, winds are going to be picking up from the south-southwest, 35 to 40-knot gales, extending back to St. Paul and St. George. That's going to shift the ice around a bit. And by the time we get into Saturday, winds do come down a bit in the north. South winds there, Norton Sound, 15 knots. 25, 30 knots, ice-covered areas, kind of a mix there, turning back toward the southwest and south, picking up to 35 to 40-knot gales from St. Matthew down to St. Paul and St. George, with waves building 15 to 20 feet out over the open water. And then finally, along the Arctic coast, easterly winds to 25 knots, but the ice is in place. Could be some shifting even with that. And then as we extend to the Chukchi Sea, east to northeast winds 15 to 25 knots and upwards to 30 knots off of Wales and Port Clarence there north of St. Lawrence Island. And for Saturday, winds will be out of the east 20 knots along the Arctic coast, Katovik on over toward Utqiagvik. And then out of the north there as we drop down through the lower Chukchi Sea at 15 to 20 knots. And turning easterly there west of Nome and north of St. Lawrence. That's all the time I have. Thank you for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.